I want to take a few minutes to explore a concept that comes up again and again and again in the work I do with private coaching clients, in the Trust the Flux program as well. And really, it's a fundamental skill for living a life as an individual human being. And I should warn you, there's some explicit content as you go forward, but it's really fun, explicit content. So, take it or leave it. And I want to put this in perspective with a little story. There's a woman I was working with, for a very short period of time, and she felt just a little fuzzy, foggy. She was dealing with some kind of mysterious health issues, and it was kind of reflected in her mental state. Like she couldn't seem to digest information in a good way. And she was feeling a little lost with what she wanted to do with her practice. She was a coach working with people, a trainer. And we got to talking, and she said, I just don't really know what it is I'm into. I have a hard time coming up with something that's really mine. But I know what I'm not into. And she started talking about the other women in the studio where she was working. It was, kind of a conventional Pilates studio, and she said, I am not into their anatomical cues, like those kind of cadaver cues where you prompt a movement of engage this muscle or that muscle. I'm not into all the machines and toys and stuff that they use. I don't want any part of that. I don't want their white picket fence life and all of that. That's not what I'm into. And I thought, okay, so this is good. And so we got into a little bit of an embodied practice of finding out what the yucks are. And, little shorthand. It's kind of fun. We don't need to make this stuff too complicated. So we figure out what the yucks are. And that's an organismic response. If you see something gross, it's like, ugh, your entire system just goes, nope, not that. And that's a fundamental property for any living organism, is the ability to differentiate what's not you from what's you. I mean, one of the fundamental things that makes a living organism is the ability to regulate itself. And the only way it can do that is if it can keep a strong barrier between self and other. If it can say yuck to some stuff. If you don't know how to differentiate what's yuck from what's yum, for example, you're going to have wicked digestion. You're going to be totally overwhelmed with just information overload. You're not going to know head from tails. You're not going to know what's you and what's someone else. You're not going to know when you're projecting shit into this conversation or when it's someone else coming at you. You're going to give too much or take on too much. You're not going to have any filter. Or what's worse, on the other end, you might close off entirely and let nothing in and give nothing out. I've been there. That was my default for years. So I'm working with this woman, and we get yuck and do this. Actually go through these movements of doing it. Not go through the motions, go through the movements. Yuck to dudes revving their motorcycles unnecessarily. That's not for me. Yuck to decaf coffee. Yuck to, people going through flashy tricks for the sake of tricks. Whatever it is your bag, you know what you're not about. Oftentimes that's easier to know than what you are about. So go through that. Try it a few times. Yuck to whatever that is, and give it a full embodied kind of push, and just see what happens for yourself as you do that. So what we ended up doing, this woman and I, we got a whole bunch of yucks. It was yuck, 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 yuck. None of that stuff's me. And I said, okay, so you've got this boundary now of yuck all over. But if there's nothing inside that boundary, you're an empty shell. I hate to tell you, but you need some yum in this sea of yucks. Again, shorthand makes it easier. So you've got your yucks and you've got your yums. And she said, well, I don't even know what that really means. And I was like, okay, so you're not into the anatomical cues. You're not into the white picket fence life. You're not into all the toys and machines. What are you into? What can you bring in that's decidedly yours, that you can identify with? And she said, well, I don't love my career in dance growing up, but I do love rhythm and some sense of music in there. It's okay, yum. And again, these movements matter. This is gathering something in toward us. So it's find the yum. Yeah, that's what I'm into. Yum, mindfulness, yum, being able to express your emotions and engage as a human being, yum, time outside, all of this stuff. So those are my yums. So for her, it was like rhythm, yum. Games, yum. Community stuff, yum. Like natural movement, yum. So then she asked, okay, I've got all these yums, and that does feel kind of good. That feels a bit more like me, but I don't quite know how they piece together. And here's the thing, that part you don't have to figure out yet. It's like, as long as your system can differentiate yuck from yum, you don't have to think through how to build out your cellular structure. You don't have to think through all of your beliefs and your ways of engaging with the world. Your system automatically does that when it has this differentiation in place. So there's yuck and there's yum. And if you're the type of person who really struggles with setting boundaries, like you let too much shit in or you give too much out there, it's like, here's a good one for you. Instead of yuck, give it like, it's kind of fun. You get up and you give it like a fuck you. So like, yuck, fuck that. I am not into dead anatomical cues. Fuck that. And you give it a kick. Create even more space. Like, it's going to feel a little gimmicky. It's going to feel a bit like a game, like some trick you're doing. And all right, it kind of is. But hey, it's fun. I mean, you can spend a whole afternoon walking around with like, fuck you, yuck, yuck, fuck. And you're going to feel pretty good. Because what we're doing is mobilizing something within yourself that has to establish a boundary between you and the rest of the world. So let yourself have some fun with this. Let yourself play. The more we can embody this, the more we can almost make it a game, the more we learn, the more we integrate. So you get your fucks and your yucks out there and you find some stuff that's yum and just bring some conscious awareness to that. And trust that your system is smart enough to do this work on its own, okay? So you don't need to then go and logically analyze through and add this and that and add the rhythm and add the natural movement and add the games. You don't need to do that. You're going to naturally start to bring more of that into whatever it is work you're doing. Like, I don't have to logically add in natural movement and mindfulness and embodiment and philosophy. It's like, that's just the stuff I do. That's what we're talking about here, right? So again, keep in mind, the fundamental property of a living organism is the ability to regulate itself, to know what is self and what is other, to establish a boundary, not a firm, rigid wall. You've got to let some nutrition in, or else you're going to starve. You're going to asphyxiate. You have to let stuff in. But at the same time, you have to know what to keep from coming in. So think of a cell, fundamentally. Cell has the membrane. It lets some nutrients in. It expels waste. It gets rid of what is no longer useful. Hint, hint, that might be important as well. And it has this semi-permeable membrane. And you have something like that too. I mean, quite literally, you have like your skin and your digestive tract. That's what modulates self and other in a very real physical way, right? And a big part of that is your nervous system as well. And we don't have a whole lot of time in this video to go into the links between nervous system and skin and digestive tract, but know that they're related in a very cool, very fundamental, deep, deep way. They actually stem from essentially the same cells in the developing embryo. There's a developing body and it leads to skin, it leads to digestive tract, it leads to nervous system. These are the things that modulate you versus the rest of the world. Think there's something to that? So anyway, I digress. If you want to put this into practice, and if you're struggling with setting boundaries for yourself in your friendships or romantic relationship, at work as well, give some fucks, give some yucks, and also bring as much attention to what is yum. So we need both. We need out there, we need in here, and we need a firm but permeable boundary between the two.